Coming up next on the Witness the World podcast, the happy psychic.
We do have a fated path. Destiny does exist, but that doesn't mean that every choice and decision that we make is taken out of our hands.
The content here is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Any content here should not be construed as financial, medical, or any other type of professional advice. Good day, everyone. Welcome to episode 25 of the Witness the World podcast. My name is Ben Choi, and today we'll be heading to the United Kingdom. We'll be chatting with someone that'll help us get in touch with our spiritual side. We're pleased to bring on Gemma Lonsdale. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Gemma, most people know you today as a psychic medium, life coach, and podcaster. Your podcast is called The Happy Psychic, but 5 years ago, life was anything but happy for you. So to kick things off, could you tell us a little bit about where you were at 5 years ago and how you had a spiritual awakening a few years later?
Yeah, so I was in a regular job in the regular world, and I had unfortunately went through me and my husband, my daughter's dad, my ex-husband now, we were going through a bit of a struggle time, and we had decided to separate. And I actually found a lump in my breast that same week. So I was in the process of moving out of the family home whenever I discovered that I actually had cancer. And it was just a complete shock to me. I was very embedded in the corporate world, in the material world, with my things, my nice car, my money, my house, and all of these things that I wanted to do. And yes, all of a sudden I found out that I had cancer, and that was one of the biggest shocks of my life, really, especially at that time, because I was having such a big upheaval in my life anyway with my separation. So to find out that same week, and they knew whenever I went with the lump, once they started doing tests and everything, yes, they hadn't done the biopsy, but they knew what they were looking at. They said, we're pretty sure that this is cancer, we just don't know what type. And I had just taken delivery of my first BMW. I had got myself an M Sport, an M3, and I really loved that car. And I had just gotten it the day before, and I can remember sitting in the car and crying and not even knowing if I was going to be alive whenever the lease finished. So it was a very, very troubled time, I would say, in my life.
I see. So how did you get on this path of I call it a spiritual awakening? Was it just randomly bumped into someone that you talked to, and then someone kind of triggered something for you, and then you veered onto that path?
So it's very funny that you mentioned that. Actually, I had actually been on a date, and I remember meeting somebody, and I could just think to myself the whole time, like, wow, what sort of person do I need to be to have somebody like this? He was almost like reflecting all of these insecurities towards me. And I had felt this connection with him. And whenever we first met, I was almost like a whoosh of energy. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is him. This is my person. And it wasn't until after I came away from that and realized that that wasn't going to go anywhere, and I was suddenly just questioning all of my life choices, I suddenly started to become very aware of the discontent within my life. I wasn't really happy in my job at the time. I wasn't really getting the satisfaction from my corporate career. I was there because it was paying me well and giving me a certain lifestyle. But obviously me and my ex-husband, we had separated at that point, and I started to go through all of the patterns of, it was just this big emotional purge. I started to get emotions coming up to the surface that I hadn't really had come up previously. I had been a master of repression, and I had been repressing all of these things that I didn't want to address, all of these things within my life that I wasn't happy with. And I suddenly was going through, relationship patterns and life choices that I had made over the years, and thinking to myself, well, how am I in this position? How can I be here and feeling such a lack of satisfying, no fulfillment really around life? And now I had dealt with cancer as well. So it was that started to really make me seek something else, because I was doing the inner work of asking the deep questions. That really started to make me more aware, or maybe perhaps more open to what the universe was trying to bring to me. And I started to have some really, really unusual experiences that I hadn't had before. And I can really, when I think back, it was as though the universe was trying to communicate with me. That's how it felt at the time. And I instinctively knew that I was having a spiritual awakening without even knowing what a spiritual awakening was. I actually had to Google, why do I keep thinking about spiritual awakenings? And it was that. So it wasn't just a profound moment. It was a series of moments and experiences and energies, and that really took me down this path. It wasn't just one thing. It was an accumulation of lots of things that I had been repressing down for quite some time.
I see. So then, out of curiosity, was that maybe an impetus to go, see an expert, see a psychic, perhaps have a reading, and then maybe they kind of gave you some kind of a vision that you kind of spurred your path forward where you're at today?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I did feel very drawn to going to a spiritualist church. So in the UK, we have a spiritualist church network where we can go and connect with other people who are in this world, or who are interested in this world, and they have a development circle. Most churches will have a development circle, which is a group of people that get together maybe once a week or once a fortnight in order to learn and develop their spiritual gift, and to connect with spirit, and to learn and to practice, and to try different things. And I felt quite drawn to that. But at that stage, I didn't really know that I was spiritually gifted. It's quite bizarre actually, because whenever I look over my whole life, I've had a lot of moments in my life where I've always known things that I shouldn't know, but I couldn't really tell you, oh, I seen a spirit came to me and told me that. I knew the information, but I didn't really know how I knew it. And at that time, I didn't really consider myself to be any different than other people. However, you mentioned about going to see a psychic or a psychic medium. There was a reading that I had a few years before that moment, and I had actually, well, whenever I think back, there was quite a few moments, but on one particular reading, there was two readings actually that were probably very significant. And one of them, my daughter was just a baby. Now, my daughter is coming up on 10 years old now. So this was going back nearly 10 years. And the woman told me that I was a clairvoyant, which is the ability to see spirit and see spiritual information. And she said that I hadn't tapped into it, but I was very skeptic. And I really thought to myself, she maybe just tells everybody this. So I didn't really accept that information. I thought, well, if I'm seeing spirit, I would know. And I wasn't. So I really dismissed that. And I had another situation where I had a reading with somebody, and he had actually come to my house at the time, and I had recorded it, and it was connected to my MacBook. I had recorded it on my iPhone while we sat talking on my audio notes. And I used a MacBook for work because I worked in the technology field at the time. And everything was all synced together. And there was one evening, whenever I was going through all of this purging and the emotions coming up to the surface, that I had a call with a client in San Francisco. So obviously me being in the UK, I'd had to do it in the evening in my time. Once we finished that call, I had set my laptop down and I think I went to get a cup of tea or something, something probably very British, a cup of tea or something like that. And all of a sudden there was something that started to play. It's like, oh my gosh, what even is that? I couldn't even figure out where it was playing from. And then when I realized it was the recording of the reading that I'd had a number of years beforehand, whenever I was still with my daughter's dad. And he was telling me about, I was going to go on this spiritual journey. I was a healer. I was, all of this stuff. He'd even actually talked about my cancer, but he hadn't used the word cancer. And I just hadn't picked up the information at that particular time, as that was what he was trying to tell me. So that was a really profound moment, because there was so much in that reading that resonated with me at that particular time. But because I was not aware of it at that time, whenever he was giving me the reading, I dismissed it. So yeah, there was a lot of information that was already coming from psychics before I was aware of the path that I was on. However, once I'd started to get myself immersed in the spiritualist church as well, that was a very good support, because there was a couple of psychic mediums there that were very confident in the gifts and the messages that they were bringing through. So it definitely did help encourage me and help bring me sanity in those moments whenever I was really questioning myself and questioning if I was maybe having some kind of a psychotic episode. They really did help ground me and help validate the feelings that I was having, and also validate some of the experiences that I had been having as well. Because you have to remember, at that point, I wasn't really hearing spirit or seeing spirit. It was all of these other things that were happening that were making me feel like spirit were communicating with me, and I was having lots of light bulb moments, but it wasn't the communication that I know today, if that makes sense.
I see. So I guess part of your, journey here was to get healed first. That was probably step one. And then you started getting these, light bulb moments, and then they kept coming. So you're more immersed into this. And then at some point, I guess you felt it was like your calling. You probably started helping the odd person, give them more reading, and then it kind of got momentum from there. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, very, very similar to that, actually. So it sort of started, I would say that, we're never really completely healed. So getting on a healing path was definitely a part of that project, because we have to offload all of the things that we're dealing with, all of those things that we're carrying through life. We need to offload them, because they're no longer serving us. So we need to get them out in order to make way. It's like unpacking a suitcase after you've come back from vacation. We need to clear it out in order to make way for the next trip. It's the exact same thought process. We need to clear all of that stuff out to leave space for new stuff coming in. So the healing journey that we get on, though, is like an ever-long thing. I'm still not completely healed. There's still things that I'm healing, and I will be like that until the day that I die. We will always be healing something, but it definitely was a time of compressed healing, I would say, whenever everything just came up to the surface at once, and it was like a lot of stuff really came up. However, whenever I started to become aware more of the universe communicating with me, I bought myself some cards, like tarot cards, and I started doing stuff like that. And I wasn't really getting a lot of information through. There was times that I was sensing things. I was using my intuition a lot at that time. But there wasn't really many profound moments where I could say I seen someone or I was hearing people. I did have one moment, but that was it. And then I didn't really get a lot for a long time. And then one day, my gift just switched on. Now, whenever I would have used the cards are really a tool that we use in order to help us tune in to the spirit realm. If you can think of whenever you meditate or whenever you're nice and relaxed, you're just so much more receptive to information and things feel a little bit different. Whenever we look at a tarot card or an oracle card, it often has lots of really nice imagery, and it's whenever we soften our gaze and we look at that card, it might trigger a thought within us, or suddenly the image lifts off the page, and in my mind's eye I'll see something happening, or and it'll kick off a little vision. And I was getting information like that, so I would sit with a friend and I'd suddenly see her lifting something in her back garden and water gushing out, and it may not make sense to her at that particular time, but then she might message me the next day and say, gosh, I had like a flood in the back garden, the drain was blocked, and that was what I was seeing. So I had a lot of those moments that were very deliberate, and it wasn't until I actually had my cancer returned again, so I had to go and have another operation, and it was the day before that surgery that everything seemed to click into place. I was dropping my daughter off at her dad's house, and his granddad had appeared to me in spirit. And I went in, and we sat and we had a cup of tea, and we were chatting, and I was just, all this information was coming through for, my ex. And that was phenomenal, because that was the first time that I had actually done a reading for someone without using cards. And it was so clear. And it was just like nothing I had ever experienced. And that was when my gift really started. But it was almost as though spirit had flicked a switch on me that day. It was like they turned me on, like they pressed the on button, and they plugged me into the power. And ever since that, I've really then worked to perfect it, and really focused on doing something with it in order to help people. And that was really whenever I made the switch to doing this full time as a career and completely leaving the corporate world behind.
That's a great overview, Gemma. So you were talking about this gift, and I'm kind of curious to know, is the spiritual abilities that you've tapped into, you've kind of harnessed over the years, is this something innate to most people? Like, does everyone have it to some degree, and then just some people, kind of work on it over time, and they can really, make it really good? Or it's not everybody has this? I'm just wondering, based on your experience, who you've talked to, who you've worked with, I wonder if you could just tell us a little about the powers themselves.
So everybody has the ability to tune into this. This is a universal energy. However, not everybody is going to see spirit or hear spirit in the way that I do, but we all have access to this energy. So the best way that I can describe it is it's being intuitive. You meet somebody and we're using it every day. We're using it and tapping into it every day without even knowing. Some of us are better at it than others, and some of us have a more in tune version. But if you meet someone and you suddenly think to yourself, oh, like, I like this person, or, oh, I don't like this person, you're automatically like deciding, if this is a good person, if this person is beneficial to you, if you'd like to continue the conversation, if you want to avoid this person, if you don't trust them. You're picking up on that subconsciously. You don't even really necessarily have to think about it. And that is exactly how this gift works. It's just tapping into the energy that's around us. Like, we're all interconnected. We all give energy off. We all, have the opportunity to receive energy. And it's that at a base level is what it is. It's just our intuition and our instincts whenever we're picking up on things. It's like, okay, well, is this a good idea or is it a bad idea? What am I feeling? Should I go on the date? Is this person for me, or is this person not for me? It's just those little feelings. Once we start to really tap into it on a conscious level and realize and become more aware of the information that we are receiving, then we can start to be very deliberate about it. And we can think, oh, that friend that I had whenever I was 14, like, what's she doing now? Or, and we can start to then get an intuitive feeling on things like that. And it won't always be accurate. That's part of the learning journey. We've grown up and we've not necessarily always been fully trusting of this. So it does take a bit of time to relearn that aspect of it. But there is absolutely the path there if people want to go down and really develop this and really work with it and learn to trust it. That door is open for the most part, but the spirit realm would definitely expect diligence. It isn't just a case of I woke up one day and was able to do it. I had to put a lot of hard work in. and develop myself and working with the cards and meditating and really putting my intentions out to the universe by buying that tarot deck, by always working with that tarot deck, even when I felt like I wasn't really getting a lot back. That was me putting my intention out to the universe that I'm going to do something with this, and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to be good. And then they rewarded me with that. So I think people sometimes think that, oh, Gemma's so gifted. Like, it would be amazing to have that gift, but I did have to work hard for it as well. Yes, it definitely was a calling, but I had to work hard for it.
I see. Yeah. Thanks for those insights, Gemma. So I want to kind of turn to, some of the people that you have worked with. And, it's funny, one of the key themes of this podcast is to, share stories of success, struggles, as people try to become better versions of themselves and live their best lives, which is, kind of like what you've done. You've exemplified this in many ways. And just wondering, for the people that I guess are at a bit of a crossroads in life, looking for some bit of inspiration, like, are those the kind of people that you've seen, or just wondering what type of people do you work with? Is everybody across the board, perhaps?
There's actually quite a wide variety. So some people will come just looking to know, is there Mr. or Mrs. Perfect going to cross their path anytime soon? I get a lot of that as well. But more and more, I'm getting people coming who want some inspiration or have a sense of feeling lost in life, and they don't really know where their passion lies, and they're really eager to uncover that, and they don't know how to, they don't know what to do in order to heal, or maybe they want some reassurance about the direction that they're headed towards, or perhaps their path at the moment is quite foggy, but actually Spirit want to give them some reassurance and inspiration about what's on the past 10 years down the line. What does life look like in the long term? Even though they're not going to give you the detail about now, that's for you to figure out. But okay, well, in the long term, this is what it looks like. And suddenly the hands are like, coming up to the mouth, and they're like, oh, that makes so much sense, because I felt really drawn to doing this and I've been ignoring it. Or, people always tell me I'm a real natural with that. I've never really thought about doing it as a career. It's all of these things that we almost, the universe is handing it to us on a plate. Whenever we get the nudges of, I really want to do this, or I really want to go here, or I really wish that I could learn such and such, or we get the urge to write a book, or whatever it might be, to create a podcast. And it's, the universe almost like nudging us in the direction that we need to be in order to have the path come to fruition on our destiny, I guess is the best way to put it. And it's an amazing thing to be able to experience that with people. Likewise, I help a lot of people uncover what needs to be healed. So somebody might come aware that they're being very triggered by a relationship, but not really sure where the root cause of that sits. And I can really help them uncover that. I have helped people uncover trauma, like sexual trauma, where they were abused and they had repressed it so much that they had forgotten about it. So it's really helping people be guided, like helping to guide people on their path, and helping to just really give them the support that they need at that particular time. And one of these stories actually around the sexual abuse and how that had been repressed, that was actually a really profound story from my point of view as well, because I had read for this person and I kept seeing child abuse in their history. I kept being told about child abuse. I was showing them being touched inappropriately. And whenever I actually mentioned it to them, they had said that actually the family member was actually serving a prison sentence for that, but they were adamant that they hadn't experienced it. It was other people that had experienced, but they hadn't, they hadn't been touched themselves. And really, that wasn't what I was being shown. I was being shown that they had experienced it, but they just weren't dealing with it, or they had repressed it. It was the very fact that this person was actually in prison and they knew that they had done this to other people, that opened the door for them to really experience their own healing. So it's a very, very powerful thing. And to give people the reassurance that actually this challenging time that they're experiencing won't be permanent. And that is typically when people come to someone like me, whenever they're having a hardship or they have questions that they can't answer, they want insight. But it's usually stemming from some sort of a struggle in their own existence, or some sort of discontent in their own existence. And it's amazing to be able to come along and help them through that. We don't always get to give people the answers. I think that's a really important part. Just because I have this ability doesn't mean that I'm going to get all of the answers handed to me on a plate, because sometimes it's not up to us to be given the answers at that particular time. We have to discover it. We have to uncover it. We have to dig deeper. We have to do the soul searching, because that's actually really a really important part of the path. But spirit might say, well, actually, I'm not going to tell you what's happening in the short term. That's for you. You need to figure that out. However, this is where it gets you. So we're not going to tell you what happens now and what you should be doing, but this is where you end up. And it's just sometimes having that reassurance and that bit of peace that helps us carry on, I guess, and gives us that little bit of motivation to move forward.
That's well said, Gemma. So let's say we get some people that are, maybe very skeptical. They've never seen a psychic before, and they all of a sudden, get that nudge from the universe, and they are a little bit spiritual or psychic curious, and they try to, piece together what's the best way of going about it. So I guess my next question here is, what's the best way for people to find the psychic that speaks to them? I mean, I've gone to a psychic in the past, and I've gone to a few actually. And what I did is I went online, do a little internet search, check out some reviews, and if it says there's a number of stars, this person has a good track record, give it a try. And then when you kind of check out some websites, there's the different modalities, as I would call them, because you alluded to, there's tarot card reading, clairvoyance, and I mean, how does one best go about finding the right psychic? You just got to give it a try and then kind of take it from there.
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. So whenever I think back to going to see somebody myself for the first time, whenever I was the skeptic, whenever I wasn't sure about all of this, and I was, psychic curious, as you put it, I just found her. She was local to where I was, and she was available. That was really the biggest, factor in me choosing her, was that she was able to see me at that particular time, and she was close to where I was. However, I do find the people that come to me will say that they've seen me on TikTok or Instagram, or they've watched me on YouTube. TikTok tends to be the main place that people find me, and it was just something I said or something about me that they felt really drawn to, or they felt really, that I really resonated with them for some reason. And you definitely will find that. You will find that you're, going to be more drawn energetically to the people that you need to connect with. But likewise, you might see somebody online and you might think, oh gosh, no, I definitely couldn't go to them. They're not for me. But likewise, going on and trying to find somebody that is reputable, if they have reviews, they have an online presence, they are quite open about being able to connect with spirit, or they're quite clear in terms of how they work. Obviously, if you're Googling someone's name and there's a lot of spurious information on there, and they're talked about in forums and in a really derogatory way, then that might cause you a little bit of alarm. However, there are also people that will go to see those people and will have amazing experiences. Not every psychic and every person will be able to connect in with each other. There is just those times when the energy just isn't a match, and it does unfortunately happen. But if you're feeling really drawn to that person, you feel like you've got a bit of a good feel, that's always a really good place to start. Trust your own intuition. And yes, likewise, if you're going online and trying to find, reviews and things of people, that's also a good way to start. Likewise, I've actually had some really good experiences by just picking up a phone and dialing a psychic line and not knowing who I'm going to get connected to and just working on potluck. And I've always heard the information that I've needed to hear at that particular time. So sometimes it is just about being lucky. If you're supposed to hear the message at that time, I'm a firm believer that the universe will make sure that you connect with the right person in order to receive that. But likewise, if you're not in a place where you're perhaps ready to hear that information, or you're ready to have your eyes opened to the spirit realm, then the information won't be as profound for you. And I really do believe that. However, whenever we think of our journeys, it's all about planting seeds. You don't suddenly think, oh, I'm really curious about going to a psychic, and then sit down and come away like, oh my gosh, that was profound. I'm a firm believer. It doesn't always happen like that. Change happens gradually. A change in perception, a change in mindset happens gradually. So it's sometimes just over a longer period of time. And the psychic reading that you have at that particular time might still have you a bit uncertain, but actually there's been lots of seeds planted in that reading that actually will be profound for you at a later date, or will help the next person on your path take you a little bit deeper into that world. So it's important to be aware that we, yes, sometimes we can have moments that really make us shift our thinking immediately, but that doesn't happen all the time. Often the journey into this is a one where there is a bit more of a gradual shift with it.
Thanks for your take, Gemma. So one thought that I had in mind is like, universe nudging us, that sort of thing. And what I always pondered is like the question of fate or destiny. Like, is there a preordained path for our life, or is it a matter of we can make choices to kind of, alter the course of the trajectory of our life? And so from your experience, and like, are we kind of in control of our destiny? So I guess an example I want to kind of throw out there is, so let's say I have a psychic reading, and psychic tells me some bad news that, on this next trip to Cuba, something bad is going to happen. Now, I could take that information and process it and say, okay, you know what? I'm not going to go to Cuba ever. And that would change me to going to a different path in life. That's kind of what I would think. So is that the concept for, I guess, psychic readings? It's like the spirits and all the information we get from those readings, it's a possible path, not a preordained path of our life. Is that kind of how you could describe it?
It's a very, very interesting topic, actually. So in cases like that you've just described, where, you're being told that you're going to have a bad experience on your next trip to Cuba, actually, maybe you're being told that in order to divert. Maybe you're being told that in order to change your plans so that you don't go on that trip. However, if something is destined or fated, then it is going to happen regardless. So chances are, if that's supposed to happen, you'll not be told that. And this is a really important thing to be aware of, that just because the psychic is gifted, they only have access to the information that the spirit realm want them to be able to access at that particular time. So it's still the universe that is in charge of what information comes down. We're not going to stumble across information as psychics that we're not supposed to stumble across. So if you're being given that message, it's giving you an opportunity to either prepare for the bad thing that's coming, or to change path and to change focus. My understanding of destiny and fate, and what I have really been taught from spirit, is that we do have a fated path. Destiny does exist, but that doesn't mean that every choice and decision that we make is taken out of our hands. What it really means is that whenever we have this journey of life, so say we go from A to Z, right? It just means that there are various different junctures along this path that are destined, that we must go through. And no matter what choices or what direction we turn, ultimately we're going to be headed for that next destined juncture. But that is because there is just something in there. It might be a lesson, an important lesson that we have to learn. It might be an important connection that we have to make, something that happens there that opens a door for us for 10 years down the line. It's a very, very complicated subject, but really that's my understanding of it. We have freedom in the day-to-day life of the choices that we make, but we'll never be allowed to veer too far off course that it completely takes us away from that next destined part on our path and from our overall image. Another thing that is really fascinating actually is soul contracts. So before we come into this incarnation, my experience and what Spirit have really shown me is that we really decide on what we want to do whenever we come into this path. We're deciding the special connections that we're going to have. You know, if we're going to meet that one person that is going to be our lifelong love, and that might be a destined connection. However, what I see online quite a lot of is people saying, "Oh, well, we can tear up those soul contracts." You know, we tell the universe, "No, I don't want to be connected to this person anymore because they're causing me too much heartache." And really, that goes against what they have taught me. It's very much that actually, if we have contracted to somebody and we have agreed before this incarnation to have that destined encounter, that is going to happen regardless, because it was picked for a reason. So although our human self doesn't want to feel the pain attached to, you know, having that person reject us or the hardship that that person is putting us through, the hard parts of that connection, our human, you know, of course, doesn't want to experience the pain because we're shying away from hurt. However, on a higher level, that pain is teaching us something and is helping us to heal and to grow and to evolve. And although that situation or that person is causing us pain at the moment, that is actually really going to transform us and help us become better people and help us with a glow up, essentially. So it serves a purpose. It just doesn't make sense to our human. So I hope that has explained it. There's a lot of profound thoughts and information that they give me, but really our human form just cannot possibly comprehend everything and the whys and the wherefores for why everything happens. You know, it's often just very beyond our comprehension, but that's the information that they have served me so far with it.
That's funny you say that, and it's great insights there, Gemma. I guess the phrase that comes to mind is I always use is like the universe works in mysterious ways, and as it works its mysterious ways, I suppose it's doing a teaching lesson for all of us and giving us, you know, some optionality on how we kind of go about our journey. And I guess how we kind of get there, it depends, you know, on how we do. And it sounds like it's doing some 4D chess as well. Well, with my example, it's like, oh, maybe I wasn't supposed to go to Cuba after all, which is kind of funny. So,
yeah, but it's, you know, we do have the choice. We often have the choice, unless we're in the situation and you're in Cuba when you're getting that information, and then it's a bit like, oh, okay, well, I need to prepare myself. What can I do to prepare for what's coming? But in a lot of cases, if we're being given the information, it's so we can avoid it, because actually it could be a case of that actually you're going to receive that information, but Spirit know already, oh, he's going to go anyway. We'll just tell him. It'll help him, you know, have some, you know, more profound connection to the universe. But we know he's still going to go to Cuba, so it's fine. And that could be, you know, that could be a reality too. There's definitely something more that's at play, and it's a very uncomfortable scenario here, but if you can think of a child that has a really rare form of cancer, and of course we just think like, why would God do this to a child? Why would God let this happen? However, there are so many profound experiences and lessons that really come from even those situations, because the parents are being taught about compassion, about coping with life while they're dealing with this there's a network of people around that child and that family that are learning how to offer support to people and are learning to experience grief and things like that as well. But also the doctors are learning about this rare form of cancer, and it's almost like a test case for them where they're able to learn and expand their own knowledge, and we're helping medical science with this as well in order for somebody to help better the next time. So it's, there's always learnings, no matter what happens in our life, no matter what terrible things happen, there are good things that come from that. Somebody is going to benefit somewhere, whether it's because they've grown as a person or because their life has been saved because of this new medical technology or this new, pharmaceutical drug that's being developed. There's always the bigger picture. It's just that whenever we're in the moment, we often don't see that.
Interesting stuff. So that kind of brings me on to something else I was always curious about. Like, so sounds like I'll just call it the universe, again, working in mysterious ways, helping people in ways they probably don't otherwise know normally. Like, does the universe, is it governed, in your view, by some kind of universal ethical code of conduct? And what I mean by that is, so let's say I go in for a psychic reading and I ask the psychic, hey, can you tell me what the winning numbers in the national lottery draw are going to be? And then let's say the psychic gets a vision, sees numbers. Are they bound by this universal maybe code of conduct, say, I can't tell this person, these numbers, or maybe it's just part of the flow and just whatever happens is going to happen. Maybe they were destined to hear those numbers. Yeah, I just wonder if you can speak to
that. That's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I have asked for the lotto numbers a few times and I have always been refused. For one, I would think, well, surely, depending on who that psychic was and their own moral code, would they have just kept the numbers for themselves rather than giving them to you? So that's the first question. I think it really boils down to the fact as well that depending on the information that comes through, if that information is supposed to be known, then it'll come through. My experience is that spirit know everything. So the universe knows everything. It's all seeing, all being. There's nothing that can be hid from that higher power. It's just whether they choose to divulge it. So if we look at cases, for example, where, somebody has went missing, they will know where that person is. They will know what has happened, but it might be in that person's contract and their destiny for this to happen. Maybe this is what they came here for. And the universe will only release that information whenever it's supposed to be known by the collective and by the wider audience. So that is why there are some cases where they're just never solved. Things never come to the surface because the universe really has the power to bring that up. So if the lotto numbers come through, I would see no reason why they couldn't be divulged to you. Now, it does open up a lot of questions where there are certain psychics who would say, I'm not going to read on this topic. I'm not going to read on that topic. I'm not going to talk about death. I'm not going to talk about this. But it's really been my experience and my firm belief that if the spirit realm are giving me that information, that it is to be passed on. And it's not up to me to decide what information is filtered, because actually we're all different, and the information could even be to help heal somebody as well. An example actually that I can give you is I have a client that I've read for her a few times, and on one occasion I was being told that her mum was going to pass soon, and obviously that's it's a bit of a funny thing to give to somebody. We don't usually hear of things like that coming out in readings a lot. However, I hesitated, and my spirit guide actually said to me, no, she can deal with this. That's important. And I told her that information. She didn't flinch, didn't flinch. And she just said, I'm really pleased to know that, because now I know to make the most of the time that I've got left. So spirit always would know how that person is going to react, whether they're going to be able to cope with that information, whether it's beneficial for them to have it. Perhaps that person needed to get a flight home to go and see her mum, rather than having like the distance there, if that makes sense. But likewise, they will know if somebody isn't going to cope well with that information and decide to hold back. So that's really where I come from. I think to myself, I have to really trust in the higher power and trust that if they're giving me information, that it serves a purpose and that it is important to be given over at this particular time. So it's a challenge, because there are some things that I come out with that people would shun me for, but I'm really putting my faith in the spirit realm and trusting that there is a purpose as to why they're giving me that information, and that there is a reason why they want somebody to know that. So likewise, if the lotto numbers were to be known, then maybe, maybe you just need to find a new psychic. Or or they're just not being given that information. If we think that during a reading, spirit will see everything, they'll know what's coming up in your future relationships, your health, and your everything. But you're only going to get a few puzzle pieces, because we're not supposed to know everything. We're only supposed to know enough that's going to give us reassurance, enough that's going to get us, quizzing our mind a little bit more and getting us curious about this, if we're supposed to be a bit more curious about the spiritual world. But we don't want to take away from the physical experience of actually being here and living and dealing with things coming up on a day-to-day basis and not knowing what's around the corner, because that is a really important part of this life as well. It's a really important part of being able to experience this existence.
That's really interesting. So, I kind of picture I'm on a boat. I'm canoeing on a rowboat or something, and then I'm going on a path, and then I veer off a little bit, and then the universe gives me a nugget, or I get this information through a psychic, and it helps me kind of veer back onto the course, because I'm eventually going to go down to location B, where whatever that is. So that's kind of conceptually how I'm thinking about that. So those are some interesting thoughts there, Gemma. So before
I just wanted, before you change the subject. So you've mentioned about the canoe, and I want to sort of paint a bit of a scenario here for you. So say you're going down this river, you're in your canoe, you are supposed to go right, but for whatever reason you think, no, I'm going to go against my intuition and I'm going to go left. But all of a sudden your canoe breaks. I don't know, the air goes out of it, if it's an airable one, and or if it's an inflatable one. So the air goes out of it, and all of a sudden you're going to have to get onto the shore, walk up a bank, cross a mountain in order to get back onto the place that you were supposed to go in the first place. Now, to you, you're thinking, oh my gosh, how has this happened to me? This hardship, I'm having to, walk, I've lost my canoe, I'm having to carry all of my stuff. But actually, what might be the case is there was a waterfall that you were heading to where you wouldn't have survived had that canoe not lost its air. So the universe will look at some of the things that are going on in our lives, and we will think, oh my gosh, why is this happening to me? But it's often protecting us from something else. It's just that we don't have the foresight or the vision in order to be aware that what's happening, this hardship that we're experiencing, is actually protecting us from something. And in your case, it may have been like a fate worse than death, so it's really important, I think, that we start to be aware of that. And I'm not saying that people need to completely reframe their thoughts. Whenever we haven't had this way of thinking for a very prolonged period of time, it's hard to suddenly be aware that it's just everything is doolally and everything is just going to be amazing. Because when we have to change our way of thinking, we have to learn to trust in the universe, we have to experience it, we have to have like this faith. And it does take time for us to adjust our minds almost, to realize that actually the hard things that happen are maybe not only helping us grow and learn, but they're protecting us from something that would have hit a lot harder than that particular moment, than what we are experiencing right now.
Yeah, thanks for that, clarity there, Gemma. It's kind of good to see, like, we kind of understand now, like, the framework that you operate under and how the spiritual world kind of is structured. So I wanted to kind of touch on, talking some visions and get into some of your visions that you've had. And probably not all of our audience knows that you had a vision earlier this year, back in around February, about something that happened in the water near the Titanic. There was that submarine incident. What was it called? The Titan submersible. And a vision came through you, like through the spirit of Bill Paxton, the late Bill Paxton. And I guess the question, before we jump into some burning questions, is like, how did the spirits kind of come to you? Now, you mentioned it was Bill Paxton, but like for other topics, other things, like, is it like maybe spirits of like Winston Churchill, JFK, maybe Albert Einstein? Do they ever come to you, or is it just the spirits, the right spirits with the right expertise comes to you for a said topic? And just wondering, how does that all work?
Okay, that's very, very interesting. So the day, whenever I talked earlier, I was saying about the day that it was the day before my surgery, and I had just brought my daughter to her dad's house, and I was giving him all of this information. On that same day, I connected with Patrick Swayze, and I had always thought that I could connect with a celebrity, and Patrick was my conscious decision because I loved watching the Dirty Dancing movies, and so I connected in with him. And then all of a sudden I connected with Chester Bennington from Linkin Park, the lead singer. And I wasn't a big fan of Linkin Park or anything like that. So for Chester to have appeared to me how he did was very out of the blue. With Patrick, I had intended to connect to Patrick Swayze, but all of a sudden, this other person came in and I recognized him, but I didn't even know his name. I couldn't think of his name at the time or what band he was in. So I have that history, I guess, of connecting to celebrities and people who are known. Now, what I do find, and you mentioned JFK, I have connected to JFK, and what I tend to find is if I have an interest in a person and I'm maybe sitting watching a documentary, for example, they'll step forward and they'll want to be remembered in that time, and they'll share some information about themselves. They might give me a prediction. They might give me something about my own life, maybe some reassurance or whatever it might be at that particular time. So they really enjoy that moment of being remembered. And obviously I'm like a giddy schoolgirl sometimes, like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm speaking to you. So it's really amazing that way. However, I also have moments where during that snippet that you're talking about, I was actually recording a podcast. So it wasn't my intention to give a message during that podcast. I kept seeing Bill Paxton's face, and then he stepped forward to me while I was recording, and he started telling me this information. And I actually had to pause it a few times and chop even bits out of the full recording. But that's often how it will happen. They will come through if there is a reason, or if I happen to be sitting watching something where they do come through. That wasn't the first time that I had connected with Bill Paxton, which is why I recognized his face, because I had watched another show, I think about a year or 2 years before, and it was mentioning him and Paul Walker. Paul Walker was in the Fast and Furious. And so I connected to Paul Walker as well at that particular time. But Bill Paxton wasn't someone that I would have connected to as regularly as what I would connect to Chester Bennington, for example. So whenever he came through that day, I had no idea of the level of information that he was giving me and how profound it might be. Now, it's really interesting to be aware that when spirit communicate with us, it's very fragmented. It's a bit like pidgin English. We'll get a word, a couple of words, an image. It's very symbolic. We don't often get the paint by numbers, very detailed version. But also that comes back to the fact that actually sometimes things are meant to happen. Sometimes we're not supposed to know in order to prevent something. Sometimes it's just enough information that we know that something's going to occur, but I wouldn't know, oh, well, it's going to be a submarine called the Titan. Oh, I need to contact this company now and tell them not to be doing their expeditions. There is a learning curve that comes from everything. There is a lot of learning, especially that comes from tragedies like that. And actually, there is something specific that perhaps there's a lesson that was learned through the loss of those lives that wouldn't have been learned in another way. So it's quite profound. So whenever people say, well, you know, why can't spirit just tell you and then we can prevent it? It's not always supposed to be prevented, is the honest answer. Sometimes things are supposed to happen. And also sometimes we do misinterpret information. Sometimes it's not as clear to us that it's a submarine, for example, rather than like another sort of boat. So it's trying to work with the information in a way where we bring the information through and we give it off. We create that message and we tell people and we share the information. But like anything, we're communicating in a language that isn't really known to us. So if you were to learn a second language, say if I was to go and learn French, for example, or Spanish, I wouldn't be 100%. I would make mistakes. I would use the wrong word for, something else. It just happens. We're not perfect. Nobody is perfect. In this human existence, none of us are ever perfect at anything. We will have a certain track record. We will have, a confidence in the accuracy, but none of us can ever say that we're perfect. So I think it's important to be aware that this sort of information is fallible as well. So the information on its own often isn't enough. It's like whenever we look at medical diagnoses, for example, I might be getting information on someone that actually would be good information to have, but would be an assistant to Western medicine rather than something that's used in isolation. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think I get it. So it's like the universe is all about, life lessons, how we learn about it, how we go about it. Sometimes maybe, a famous person might help us provide it. Sometimes not. It just happened to be the case. And of course, you're kind of drawn to certain celebrities as other people are drawn to other certain celebrities, and they might pop in if the situation warrants it and makes sense. So yeah. No, that's an interesting take there. So I wanted to get into our burning questions now, and whatever nuggets from the spirit world that will provide us, that would be great. We would love to hear the raw, unfiltered visions that you may have on a few things. So I've kind of broken down some topics in a few sections here. So the biggest topic, I think, probably on most people's mind today is like with global implications is we're a lot of global conflicts happening around the world. I think you had a take on the Ukraine war previously, and there's obviously a lot of things going on in the Middle East, and there's obviously, risks of things kind of escalating elsewhere. I'm just wondering, do you have any sense of where we are headed toward? Is it going to be further escalations that becomes far worse? And hopefully not, but I don't know. What is your sense of things?
So one of the things that my guide has actually shared with me recently is around the Ukraine and Russia war and how that is set to come to the forefront again. It's almost like that's not really at the front page of the news at the moment. It's not as prominent perhaps as some of the other conflicts that are happening. Ukraine and Russia is set to come to the forefront again. So that's one thing that she is showing me. So she's not telling me exactly what it is that's set to happen, but she's just said a large escalation. So I don't know if that's going to be an escalation just between those two countries or whether it's going to involve others, but there's something certainly that's going to be significant enough for it to be of public interest again, front page of the news, some sort of importance there. With the the Israel conflict and Palestine, there's definitely a large amount that is yet to unfurl there. Whenever she's bringing that message through to me, she's showing me a scroll. So if we can think of the scroll as the conflict, and the scroll is currently all wrapped up. We've untied it and it's started to unravel, but there's still lots that are set to happen here. However, this conflict serves a purpose as well. So it's bringing all of the hatred and the things like that and the things that need to be addressed up to the surface. It's almost trying to make it really visible in order to force us to address it, in order to improve it, because they're really trying to bring about positive energy in the world. But whenever we think of a conflict and obviously all of the lives and everything that is lost in that, it's very, very unfortunate that we have to go through that route, but sometimes that's the only route that's available in order to get things resolved. So it's almost as though if we wanted to go and build a brand new house, we've bought a plot of land, there's a house that's there, but it's a bit tattered, it's a bit haggard, it's not really fit for purpose. We want to build something phenomenal on that. What do we have to do? We have to go in, we have to take the house down, we have to build new foundations, we have to build something new on top. We can't just go in and build on top of it. So the conflict and everything that's around that is the universe's way of stripping all of that back. So it's taking all of that apart in order for something better to come in its place. And that doesn't mean that it's going to come good in a year or even 10 years. It might be 50 years down the line when things are really starting to be rebuilt and to come about better. But that's really the purpose that it serves. And along the way, with any conflict, there will, of course, be a massive loss of life. So we start to appreciate life a lot more. We start to deepen our connection with the spirit realm. We start to close ranks in with each other and offer a lot more support. So it builds a sense of community. So although there is some awful, awful things that happen in conflicts like that, there's also a lot of really positive things that come about day to day. You know, we go back to a more natural diet and it brings us closer to the earth and cooking for ourselves. Perhaps beforehand, we would have been focusing on takeout and unhealthy meals and quick fixes, not having time for our family. So it really changes a lot of things. And there is a lot of positivities that happen around that. So we've got the conflict there. Another thing that my guide is showing me here, I just wanted to clarify because I keep seeing the Eiffel Tower and I just wanted to make sure that it was the Eiffel Tower rather than something that is sometimes whenever I see something like that, it can be symbolic for France, or it could have been something that looked like the Eiffel Tower that isn't. But she seems to be quite certain here with me that this is the Eiffel Tower, and she has just said about a lot of damage that's set to happen there, a lot of damage caused. So there's something that she's indicating here where there's going to be structural damage that they would expect is going to happen to the Eiffel Tower, or it's certainly one of many things that is going to be impacted. So there's something to do with France and some sort of structural damage that's set to be caused there to the Eiffel Tower. But I don't know if it's the Eiffel Tower itself that's being targeted or if it's going to be around about that, because she seems to be drawing a circumference around the Eiffel Tower. So there's something specific and significant that she is drawing to there. She has said that that's going to happen in a short duration. Now, timelines with spirit can definitely be challenging. As I said, we're not always supposed to know the exact whens, but I have definitely misinterpreted timelines before that. One of the things that she is, whenever spirit have said short duration to me in the past, I have had it to mean a month or two, and I have also seen it to mean 2 years. So that just gives you a bit of an idea of what short duration could mean. And I guess whenever you're in spirit for, thousands upon thousands of years, 2 years is short duration. Whenever she is showing me that, she is showing me an exchange of Christmas gifts and cards, which would definitely put me at the time of the year where it's headed towards the end of this year, or happening just before Christmas or in the approach to Christmas, perhaps in another year. So that's one thing that she is showing me here, because I'm seeing Christmas cards and Christmas gifts being put under a tree. So that gives us a bit of a time marker to work with. She has said that she doesn't want us to be too concerned about that, though. But there's an important purpose that this serves in some way. She's not telling me what. It'll come clear at the time. It's probably one of those where we're not really necessarily supposed to be aware of it until it happens. So that's one thing that she is bringing through. But there is a large amount of conflict really that is set to happen. And I don't know whether it's conflict that is impacting on this in France and the Eiffel Tower in the Paris region that she's drawing me to. But there's definitely something here where there is a escalating conflicts that are coming about in the world. There is a lot of lives that are set to be lost, but it's instigating a lot of change as well at the same time.
I see. So I guess from the scroll that you were talking about, we're early on in unraveling it sounds like. And,
Yeah.
I guess one thing that I kind of thought of, you're talking about people that go through like a trauma, an awakening, and it takes a lot of emotions and hardship, like to go through that. We're kind of in that phase that we were relating this as an individual, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Very, very much so. And whenever we change as people, it's often because we've had a hard time, because we're unhappy, because some trauma has happened to us. And it's that really pushes us to change. So war is a really good way for the universe to almost push us all inwards and to push us all towards that change and to evolve into being better people. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're not good enough as we are, but it definitely helps us enlighten. Whenever we go through trauma, it's almost like the piece of coal that pops out as a diamond. We're put under pressure, which ensures that we transform, because we become so uncomfortable with the existence that we're in that we want to try and find a way out of it, and we want to find a way to build something better and build something that is worth more importance. So then we come out and we transform, and we're positive, and we're it's almost like the journey to enlightenment in a way. And it really will help a lot of people walk a path that is more spiritual, or where they are, more awakened in some regard. There is a lot of people that would talk about this time as being the Great Awakening. And I really do believe that. There are so many people that are waking up, and I don't think that we're ever fully awake. I think that the spiritual awakening process is one that's evolving. Sitting here today, recording with you, what I think are my truths today might be very different if we were to sit down 5 years, 10 years down the line, because I have learned more. I've awakened more. My mind has expanded more. And the more that I expand my mind, the more knowledge I can take on board, and the more new things that I can learn. So really, the truth that I have today is all I can refer to it as, because the truth that I had 10 years ago wasn't the truth that I had today. So I have already seen my mind expand and my thoughts adapt, and me taking this, these new belief systems on board. So I really do think that, it is a bit of a journey, and we don't really know exactly what is going to happen in order to change our perspective on something tomorrow. So we're always awakening. We're always open to accepting new knowledge that comes on board. So we'll never really be fully awakened or fully healed.
Yeah, no, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, it's a journey of constant learning, and we're always growing. So, I just want to kind of touch back. You were mentioning some trauma, and I wanted to ask you a different form of trauma. So, in some sense, the climate, or like I had a climate question. It's like the planet has been under trauma, so to speak, with all the floods and wildfires all over the places. And this is a very global impacting kind of topic. I just wanted, do you see the trajectory of, all these, climate events getting worse? Are we in some kind of a cycle?
So that's a really interesting one. So Mother Earth, I think, is probably very peed off at the moment. So whenever we have all of these things coming to the surface, the tropic storms, the hailstones on a Spanish beach in the middle of August, it's almost the universe again telling us this something needs to change. It's almost like the Mother Earth is erupting in a way. In the same way as we have the conflicts that are happening, the wars between the people, it's like that is a war in itself. All of these things coming to the surface, the cyclones, the tidal waves, the earthquakes. One of the things that I didn't actually touch upon here was that the night before I had my operation a few years ago, I kept hearing the word second coming, rapture. I kept hearing these phrases over and over again. Now, I'm not a particularly Christian person. I actually had to look up what rapture and second coming meant, just for clarification. I knew that they were connected into the Christian belief system in some way. But there's definitely a time of the new earth coming, if that makes sense. Now, I think a lot of us would have had the belief, or there's certainly that belief, that the world will come to an end and Jesus will come down and take us all again, and then we'll be all happy. And that's not technically what is happening. I guess very much so what I have realized is that what is written in the scriptures is very symbolic in a way. The world isn't ending. It's just the world that we know it as is ending. We're making way for something better to come, a better existence, a happier existence. We're really making way for that to come. But I was getting a lot of that. So really, whenever we think of what's happening in the world at the moment, we've got all these conflicts. We've got all these, strange weather events. I'm not seeing that abate necessarily at the moment. However, I do know that we're in what is known as end times. So the world isn't going to end. We're not necessarily worried about the earth imploding. However, there is definitely things happening that are a wake-up call for us and are there to try and instigate change. So I hope that gives you a bit of perspective. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a wake-up call. I think that's a good way of putting it. And with different things that happen in the world, the tough things that we see around the world, I guess we got to find a way to get the lessons learned from that, even though they might be really tough lessons to even stomach, but that's what I'm getting here. So no, I think that kind of makes sense there. So I want to kind of pivot over to lessons more maybe to be learned on more of a national front in your country, the United Kingdom, and in my country here in Canada, and a lot of other countries in the, I guess you would call them a developed world, industrialized world. There's been a big shift in regulation on speech online. People can't really freely say what they think or feel anymore. And there's, all sorts of motivations behind that. So I'm just kind of curious, is that going to continue? And now I'm trying to think of what life lesson is that trying to teach? Is that maybe to get people to be more aware of what's going on there, or maybe something else? Just wondering, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, something that I have actually talked about a little bit before. So whenever we look at the political systems that we have, that we're working under, we are sheep for the most part. And there's many of us that we have blind trust and faith in the political system that we're in and in the politicians that are leading the country. But often we don't realize that there is a choice, that we actually can take back our power. So there's very much a thing where my guides are showing me that we have given too much of our power away to people who don't deserve it. And for people taking this power on and doing the wrong things with it and using it as a way to manipulate and contort and control, whenever that should never be its intention. The people that are in charge of our countries should be humanitarians. They should be, they should have, hearts of gold and want the better for people, not necessarily be in it to line their own pockets and to, form their own coalitions and to, grow their own base of power just for the sake of having power. So one of the big lessons really is almost to cause us enough discomfort that we will be pushed to our limits in order to demand change and to go about and actually make that change happen, we are very, very powerful as people. We hold all of the power. We just don't realize that we hold the power. We do not have to accept these structures or these social structures that have been formed for us. The politicians don't always have our best interests at heart. They're not always thinking about how they can help the poor and the needy. Certainly in the UK, there's been something here recently where it's been said that the people who live on the streets are there for, their own choice. It's the lifestyle choice, and, the tents and things like that have been destroyed. And I realize that it's a much more complex topic than how I've abbreviated it. I haven't really done it justice in that regard, but really we need to be thinking of how we can help each other, not how we can trample on the poor even more and those that really need our support. So one of the things is knowing that we have power and that we can take that power back. I haven't necessarily seen for Canada specifically, but certainly in different areas of the world, I have seen the social constructs really being challenged. I have seen the governments being stripped apart. Now, that doesn't mean that the government just disappears overnight. What it means is corruption will be aired. It means the politicians that are corrupt will have the flashlight shone on them, because the universe will have taken control and ensured that information comes to the surface to cause embarrassment or to draw our attention to it. Corrupt text messages that appear, those documents that should never have been signed, that underhand, deal that was done under the table or in a darkened corner comes to light. All of these things are helping us see that the people that are in power aren't serving us. And it gives us a chance to really start to strip and reform the government system. So that is happening over a period of time. I don't know how long it will happen over. That's the bit that I'm not seeing. I'm just seeing change happening. And I am seeing an uprising. I am seeing an uprising of the general population. One of the things that I have seen is that people who wouldn't normally be outdoors with the picket, protesting, are taking to the streets and protesting. And I don't know what it is that is causing this, but all I'm seeing is this picture happening. And I'm seeing people feeling so much passion for something, or feeling that they have no other alternative, that this must happen, that they must take to the streets, they must, make their demands heard. And this isn't, although I've seen a lot of it for Britain, this isn't just in Britain that this is happening. This is really the Western world as a whole. And I think we've also seen it in the Middle East as well. So one of the other predictions that I had actually made was about the Iranian uprising, and I was seeing women taking to the streets and tearing their hijabs off, and I was seeing violence, I was seeing, explosions and things like that happening. It looked like it was very, very ugly in terms of the violence. I didn't know what was going to happen in order to trigger that. That's the bit that I wasn't shown, but I seen it happening. So I knew that there was going to be a feminine uprising in the Middle East. I didn't know specifically Iran, but I knew that it was coming, because the feminine energy wants to be recognized. We want to have our rights heard. And now, obviously, in the Western world, there are so many of us that are being stifled with, the freedom of speech and, mandatory vaccines and all of these different things. That is all aiding towards our discomfort in order to push us up, to rise up above it and take back our power. So there is a lot of change that is coming in our political systems. We won't have the step-by-step guide as to how that happens, but boy, it's happening for sure.
I say, so it's a call to action, what the universe is trying to convey in different ways. And yeah, political system. Real quickly here. I mean, there's a big election happening here for my neighbors to the south of me in 2024. Is there any sense that we're going to get to a point where it's like people down there are going to be picking something other than the two known political parties are going to go for a
Okay.
third option. Is that something on the horizon, or maybe a little too soon for that?
It's very interesting actually that you touch on that. So I'm not seeing who wins in this election. However, what I am being told is that they've not learned their lessons. So there's something here about the general population haven't learned their lesson yet. And what I am seeing is some additional pressure being inflicted upon them in some way, which is signaling to me that there will be oppression, there will be wrongdoings, there will be things where they take a wrong turn, or they elect somebody that maybe isn't going to be the best option, or the person that is elected won't implement the best solutions and take them down the right path. I definitely see hardship to a certain extent. Now, my guide has just used a very interesting word there, and she has said warmonger. So that would definitely indicate to me that there is something in the path there where there is more war, or there is I don't know if it'll be a retaliation to something, where there is a physical war where, say, the US is getting involved in that. But there's definitely something where war seems to be important. So it could be fueling and funding a war, with the likes of Ukraine and Russia, for example. But there's definitely, she has used that term warmonger. So I would definitely expect things to get worse and before they get better. But sometimes we need it to get worse in order to really put us under that pressure and that strain, in order to push us to rise up.
So yeah, thanks for that, Gemma. So I'd like to pivot over to just the technology and some financial kind of stuff here. And technology, has been the forefront. Earlier this year, we've had this, even last year, like the artificial intelligence. It's been a big thing around the world. It's changing the way we do things. And in some cases, it's changing the number of jobs that people may have. And I'm wondering if you could tell us any insights on where things may go with artificial intelligence. Is this going to be a big thing where people lose their jobs? And worst case scenario, obviously, is AI going to become sentient and think maybe human beings, and not necessarily needed as much anymore? I just wondering, any sense in that regard?
Okay, that's really interesting. So it's not a topic that I have looked into previously. So this is all brand new information for me. One of the things that my guide is showing me here is Spirit not being concerned about artificial intelligence replacing a person. If this person is jobless, they're not bothered about that. Okay. However, I want to really start to expand on that view that they've brought in there, because that sounds a little bit harsh. Really, we are all working very, very hard, and we're not getting a lot of freedom in order to enjoy life and to enjoy this existence. It's very much about enduring rather than enjoying for many people, which isn't what the spirit realm want. They want us to be coming here and able to enjoy life, able to enjoy families, to go off an adventure, go off into the forest, go kayaking on a canoe, learn a musical instrument, go to the other end of the earth. We're really here to experience it. We're not here to just work ourselves to death. So from Spirit's point of view, replacing people with artificial intelligence isn't always a bad thing for the most part. There's definitely some questions and concerns over the amount of production that occurs. For example, whenever we think of the production of cars, the production of household goods, the production of food, even to some extent, there's large amounts that are produced and that are wasted, and the products and the items aren't necessary. So there's definitely a question of whether we actually need to even be working as much as what we are. Do we need as much of the things that we actually have? Do we need them? So there's definitely that. The other thing that she was actually talking, let me just say, because she'd touched on the artificial intelligence there. The other thing that she's showing me is a child having its iPad taken away. We have obviously all of these gadgets that we use. We have our television. We have, sometimes we have televisions in every room. The kids have iPads. We might have our own iPads and games consoles. really what I'm seeing is a return to something that is more like a 1950s movie where the kids are playing in the street. They're outdoors, they're enjoying nature, they're, on their bikes, they're on their roller skates, they're playing football. But I'm also seeing as well families sitting around together and playing games and communicating, doing a board game. It's a lot of the things that we've really come away from as technology has become more prevalent. So there's a two bits for that. So technology can be used to replace us in the workplace in order to give us the freedom, in order to do the things and to spend the time with the family, or to go off and have these adventures, or, to enjoy more leisure time. Now, obviously, the question around that is, well, how do we afford to do that? If we're losing our jobs, how do we afford to do those things? That's one thing I'm not being shown, but there's definitely something that society has to do here. Now, obviously, the wealth gap is quite large. We have some very, very, very poor people at the top, and there's people who would be considered actually to be well off that really aren't well off, not whenever we consider the top rung of people and how well off and rich they are. One of the things that I have been shown over the years is the gap closing in. So the wealthy are becoming less wealthy, and the poor are becoming more rich. So again, this is going to happen over time, but there's definitely something about the wealth being spread more evenly. And really that's what needs to happen. And we don't necessarily need to understand the how it's all going to happen. We just need to trust that there is a plan. This is where it comes to. The universe has this plan. There's a bigger picture at play. And things are going to happen exactly how they need to happen in order for this to actually come to fruition. So ideally, we won't be working a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And for many of us, actually, the 9 to 5 is more like an 8 till 7, Monday to Friday, and then maybe a bit of Sunday. So we won't need to work all of that. There's no requirement for us to work all of that. So it's about getting some freedom where we can be of service and we can do what we were put on this earth to do, but also we can spend time with family. We can explore, we can learn new skill set, and just have a bit more time to be free, to live rather than to just endure.
Interesting. Yeah, you paint a picture of a whole new world, it sounds like. But I guess timelines, I guess we'll see where that happens. And I mean, you did mention like tools and like the wealth disparity, kind of the wealth gap kind of closing in. And yeah, I had to ask, Bitcoin is one of these kind of tools, or cryptocurrency, perhaps. That's something that's come to play for the last 6-7 years. Is that something that's going to be more widely adopted? Maybe that helps mitigate, the financial challenges like inflation and that sort of thing. Do you see that becoming more prominent to help people through this transition period, perhaps?
Well, that's really interesting, because I'm not necessarily being shown something about Bitcoin necessarily, or cryptocurrency. What I am being shown is various different currencies. I'm not being shown here just, how we would operate for the most part day to day, with the currency that we know, what I'm seeing here, and this is probably very symbolic, but she's showing me, a cat being exchanged for a dog, carrots being exchanged for eggs. So there's something here about us moving away from standardized currencies and going back to a time when we would have lived more maybe off the land, and being a bit more open to alternative currencies and alternative ways of doing deals with each other, if that makes sense. I probably need to read into that a little bit more to really fully understand how crypto and everything is going to play in with this. The one thing I know is that the universe is really eager for not to be letting people get rich quick, not if they're going to abuse that power and their position. There's absolutely nothing wrong with us living in an abundant universe and wanting to experience wealth and everything that it has to offer, but we need to also be working from the heart as well and doing things for the right reasons. It's no point in me just sitting here and saying to you, for example, oh, I just want to be rich. I just want to be a rich psychic. That's all that I want. I want to be in my nice car with my jumbo jet, flying to my private island next to Richard Branson. And then me dishing out all of this information where, oh, you're going to die, you're going to have a horrible life, because that's not working from the heart. Whereas if I'm doing something where I'm really helping people and I'm helping them over their hurdles and I'm doing it from a heartfelt place rather than from an ego place, then I can have all of the abundance that I want. So enjoying a nice lifestyle and nice things isn't wrong, but we need to be doing things for the right reasons. So if somebody is going into crypto just because they want to get rich quick, or they're doing something because they want to get rich quick and they're going to abuse that power and not let their good nature or their wealth filter down to other people, then that's definitely something that the universe doesn't want to happen. However, that doesn't need to mean that they will put a stop to that happening immediately. It could be a case of actually they will allow people to come in and abuse their power for a little while longer, because actually the universe hasn't woken up. The general population hasn't woken up. They haven't learned their lesson. They haven't realized that they can take their power back. So we really have to trust in a way there that the images and the visions that they're showing us are going to come. We may not know when, but they're going to come. So all of this positive way of living is going to come about. But it's also really interesting, I think, whenever we look back on maybe the times that we have had available. If we look back to 20 years ago, there was a lot of things about life that were very, very different then. And we didn't necessarily realize that things were changing. It's only through looking back that we've realized, oh, wow, like that was so different. The fashions were different. Oh my gosh, look at your hair. It's the day-to-day changes we don't notice. So it could be the very same with this, where day-to-day we don't necessarily notice the difference, but suddenly someone somewhere is going to listen to this podcast in the future and be like, huh, she was right. We have achieved that. We are in this place. But we won't necessarily just see it. It's not something that happens overnight. Change does have that gradual way of coming in.
Yeah, well said, Gemma. So there's one last burning question I had, and I think a lot of people have this question too. It's the question of extraterrestrial life or aliens, and it was kind of widely talked about earlier this year, and then obviously the conversation and the news reports don't come out as much, so it makes you kind of wonder what's real, what's not. Any sense from the spiritual realm, what they can tell us, what they're willing to allow us to learn at this point? Like, is this something like where, aliens have visited Earth, are here, or maybe they'll visit us in the future, or maybe they don't want to visit us because maybe we're too primitive for them at this point? That's maybe the learning. Any thoughts on that?
I have definitely asked myself the question recently whether we're all aliens. Now, whenever I've done some meditations and things like that, where spirit have sort of taken me to a different part of the world or a different part of the universe, I have had interactions with definitely beings that I would say are extraterrestrial beings. And also whenever I've been working with certain people on the earth, it has transpired through that reading that I have been getting that they've been connected to extraterrestrials and have come to the earth for a purpose. And then they've been gobsmacked thinking, I've always felt this. And, there might have been other things in there that have made them think that. I have never been the sort of person that has always had a firm belief in UFOs and extraterrestrials. It's been very much a case of there's a curiosity there and I wonder if it exists. But through the experiences that I have had, both myself directly and with other people that I've helped on their path, I definitely believe that there's an intermingling between the two. So aliens walk amongst us, I think, is the short version of what I'm trying to say here. I definitely think that aliens will have been here, without a doubt. I know that they're expecting to be more alien sightings in the future and more, suspected UFO sightings. Now, there's one thing as well that I was really eager to share. I had a moment the other evening, and I'm convinced I was abducted by aliens. I'm just going to come out to say that. I can remember watching a show years and years and years ago, and the person had been talking about the fact that they had made a cup of tea. They had sat down to drink the cup of tea, and they went to take a sip, and all of a sudden it was freezing cold, and the clock had, fast forwarded so much time, like an hour or whatever it might have been. And they were convinced that it was some sort of alien encounter where the time had been erased from their memory. Now, I picked up my phone from my bedside the other evening. I think this is maybe 2 weeks ago. And the realization only came to me like a day or two later. I looked at my phone and it was 1:11 a.m. It was 1:11 a.m. And 11s tend to be angel numbers. And I went to take a screenshot of it. And all of a sudden I sat it down and my phone actually said 1:31 or 1:30. So it had suddenly changed. And it was very, very profound because I had got excited at the fact that it was 1:11 and not 1:31. So I'm just convinced that I lost 20 minutes in that period to an alien abduction. Can't remember what happened, but I'm definitely convinced that there's things that happen on this earth that we just have no knowledge over and that we will not be able to make sense of until the higher power decides that it's to be made sense of. And I think it's probably an important thing to reiterate as well on this point. We're not the ones that are in charge here. We are very much not in charge. We are allowed to exist here. We're allowed to continue. There's a higher power that dictates the parameters of our existence and what can happen and what can't happen. And if there's information of corruption, a corrupt politician, if that's set to come to the surface, that's decided at a higher power. That's not something that can be repressed on the earth plane just at our will. There's something bigger than us that is here and orchestrating this all. But I've never for once been shown anything around extraterrestrials or UFOs being something to be scared of. Absolutely not. There's very much a peaceful coexistence there. I'm not sure if coexistence is the right word, but definitely if someone was to say to me, oh, there's a UFO that has landed in the park beside me, we best run, for our lives, I wouldn't be worried in the slightest. It would be very much my feeling of they come in peace. They're not coming to do harm.
Well, thanks for that reassurance, Gemma. So we've covered a lot of great stuff, interesting questions. And as we kind of wind down this podcast, I always end off with asking my guests a two-parter question. So here goes. What are you most grateful for? And what are you most looking forward to in the future?
Okay, so I am most grateful for my gift. To be honest, I pinch myself most days. The fact that I have this spiritual gift and the fact that I have the opportunity to have this connection. It's amazing to be able to live this life is just a gift in itself. And I guess in terms of what I'm looking forward to, I am definitely looking forward to a larger platform and to continuing my growth within my career. And I just think it would be a brilliant place to be able to help a lot more people and to be able to reach a lot more people and help provide them with the bigger perspective. There is so much hardship in the world, and there are so many people that are struggling with their mental health, with depression, with grief, with, war. There's so many terrible things out there, but actually once we start to understand a bit more about the bigger picture, it starts to make life a bit more palatable for us, and our existence can suddenly become a lot more positive in spite of the things that we are going through, and also that we don't have to just accept a hard existence. Life isn't supposed to be harsh. We will have harsh times in life, but it's not supposed to be an arduous existence. So helping people find pleasure in the small moments of life, and also to understand the big picture, and develop a stronger connection to themselves and to the spirit world, really, that just excites me. So I want to do more of that. And, just seeing I suppose, my path unfurl and for things growing for me, that's a really exciting thing to be looking forward to.
Those are some really great words to leave us off with, Gemma. So if people want to know more about you, where can they find you?
So I have a website, which is gemmalonsdale.guru. I also have the Mediumship Academy, which is the mediumshipacademy.com, for anyone that wants to learn to develop and expand on their gift. It's a membership community that they can join. And TikTok and Instagram is another two places that you can find me, mostly on TikTok more than Instagram. And I am Gemma Lonsdale Guru on there.
Thanks, Gemma. We'll be sure to add those details to our show notes.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So that's a wrap for episode 25. If you like this podcast, please give it a thumbs up or hit the subscribe button below. If you didn't like this podcast, give it a thumbs down, but please do tell us why with a comment below. If you have any other comments, feedback, or suggestions, you know what to do. Thanks for joining us, and namaste, everyone.